Rosamund Pike and Jamie Dornan. Welcome to both of you. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Thank you very much for coming in. It's great to see you. As I mentioned, you're here to tell us all about the new film, A Private War. It's out on the 15th of February and is this hugely powerful story, the true story of war reporter Marie Colvin. Why did you want to take this on, Rosamund?
I think because we need exceptional people and we need to be inspired by them. Marie was a courageous woman, not fearless, and I think that's what makes it all the more special. She went to some of the most dangerous places on earth, and it wasn't that she didn't have fear. She had tremendous fear, but she felt the story was so important she would go anyway. And I think she had this ability to bring things that often feel very far away very close.
Yeah. And then what was it like portraying, I mean, not just a real life person, but portraying her as a real kind of flesh and blood person and as a complex person?
Yeah.
You know, as you say, not just, you didn't want it just to be this kind of hagiography where it's the big beats of an extraordinary career and her achievements, which were incredible, but also to show her as a kind of fully rounded individual.
Yes, and you know, a woman with a vibrant sexuality. I mean, a lot of times on film, a clever woman can't also have a sexuality, it seems. But, you know,
there was a great bra scene. There was a great bra scene, which I don't want to spoil for anyone.
But I just feel that sort of, she was such a romantic, Marie, and I think one of the things that means that her writing is so readable is that she was ultimately an optimist, a romantic and an optimist who went to some of the darkest places on earth. And it's, you know, she's certainly not a tragedy junkie. That's a hard thing to say sometimes. Nor did she, you know, she wasn't trying to kind of bang a drum for herself, certainly. Her focus was on other people. She had tremendous empathy. But I think she honestly believed that the world would be a better place if everybody cared, if everybody just stopped and cared for a minute. And I think if our film does anything, I think it's to make people stop and care.
Absolutely. And Jamie, tell me about Paul Conroy, your character.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and you're a real person. I mean, you know, it's not just like any other film, is it?
No, and it's a lovely thing to be able to say, but Paul is now, you know, a dear friend of mine and of Rose's, and was with us for the entirety of the shoot. Incredible for us, and you know, selfishly for me, to have access to the man you're portraying, you know, at all times. And he was and is a war photographer, and Marie had a sort of long and quite interesting history with her photographers in the past, and not many had stuck with her for too long. She got quite impatient with many of them. But with Paul, it was a little bit different, and they forged a great sort of chemistry and friendship very early on, and had a real deep and profound love and respect for each other that lasted, you know, over the years. And you know, the same as Marie, just felt compelled to stay in these places and give people the truth of what was happening, you know, to civilian life in these war-torn places, rather than just, you know, just dealing with figures and the types of bombs going off, and the actual impact that these things were happening on civilians was so important to these two.
Yeah, I mean, their relationship is a really beautiful part of this film and so interesting. I felt like I hadn't seen a relationship like that on screen many times before, their friendship. How would you characterise it?
I think it was the most, you know, one of the most healthy relationships that Marie had with a man was her relationship with Paul. You know, it was a relationship built on trust, but also, you know, they were going to very dangerous places together, and their judgment calls, you know, the stakes were high. The stakes were life and death. And there's a key moment in the film where, you know, Paul, who came from the military background, you know, strongly advises that they do not go somewhere, and Marie insists, and he is obviously not going to leave Marie there on her own. It's wonderful when you do hear Paul tell his stories. Well, Monday, you know, we're doing this screening that's going to go around the country, and he's going to be there. And when you hear we're sort of doing an interview, I think, from Leicester Square that's going to go to the cinemas all over the country. But it really is a treasure to hear him tell these stories and reminisce.
And as Jamie says, you know, a real gift if you're portraying him. How did you research playing Marie, Rosamund? Was it a case of kind of getting as close to the people who were closest to her as you could?
Yes, it was gaining the trust, which actually put me in the position of a correspondent, I realised inadvertently, because, you know, the people who really mattered were not so easy to win round, first of all, because there's a lot of suspicion about, you know, someone you love being the subject of a film, especially when you don't know the kind of film that's going to be made. I think once they met Matthew Heineman, our director, who comes from documentary, they were reassured. And yeah, it was hearing their stories, hearing the things they didn't want to tell me initially. I think those are the things that really matter. It's the stuff that you don't want to tell because you're protecting your friend, and ultimately they're the things that make me able to understand, and then make me able to deliver a performance that's not surface, that's deep into the complexities of an extraordinary person.
That absolutely comes across. And again, I mean, let me pick up on Matthew Heineman's approach there, because as you say, he's got a documentary background, and the conflict scenes in particular, I think, were very informed by that. It sounds like a really intense process. How did he shoot, and how did those scenes work?
I mean, they were often, crazy. I have to say, I cannot stand when actors sit and say things like, it was so intense, it must have been like what the real thing was like. I'm like, no, it wasn't. No, definitely. Yeah, but
I understand.
Actors say that sometimes. Oh, it gave you a real sense of what war's like. It's like, no. So I'm not, definitely didn't do that. But I mean, Matthew obviously comes from a very successful and strong documentary background. And often going to places that people don't want to go to, and exploring conflict zones. So he does have a great grasp of what that is like. He actually can say that he knows what it's like. And so you're trying to, carry that through to a narrative background, a narrative setup as much as you can. Excuse me. And he's going for realism as much as you can. And for a lot of those scenes and a lot of the effects of the human effect, and with the civilians, Matt cast real displaced refugees from those places we're depicting, which added this huge amount of realism. I mean, and caught Roz and I off guard, I think, a little bit with some of those scenes that couldn't quite prepare yourself for what these people were going through, and then we were sort of regurgitating a lot of what they'd been through before. Like when we went to the burial site, if you obviously hopefully see the movie, and there's a scene where we go to a burial site in Iraq, and we used real Iraqi refugees for those scenes, so that when these women are wailing and throwing dust over themselves and chanting, and that wasn't scripted, that's all real. They just did that and we went with it. And that sort of realism, it's quite hard to conjure up in a narrative sense. And obviously,
for us as an actor, for you, they're doing your job. You face some of the same questions as, Marie and Paul must have faced when they were, when do we stop doing this? When is the right time to put the camera down? When does this become intrusive? I mean, did you struggle with that, Rosamund? Did you ask yourself those questions?
Yes, because I think you're constantly in dialogue with, why do I feel so much? And yet it's obviously not my pain to feel. But there's no doubt that you if you're a sensitive person, or I think probably if you're anybody, to be honest, if you're in contact with that level of trauma relived, it's very hard not to feel it, unless you've erected some serious barriers in advance, which is maybe what the people who do this job have to do, to steel yourself. But we were not. I don't think and I think we both left the experience quite skinless of having taken on a huge amount, So, yes, we don't know the experience of being in war, but we've certainly had a very visceral experience of the effects of war on people's lives.
And do you think it's an important story to tell, not just, because of the stories that, the two people that you're portraying were telling, but also for them themselves, for Marie Colvin and for Paul Conroy, because, the whole thing, if you're that type of journalist, is that you get yourself out of the story. It's not about you, it's about the story itself. So,
and I think Matt is the right director for that, because a lot of the time, the biggest close-ups of our film are on the refugees, are on the people that Marie and Paul, and that's not an accident, that's deliberate. That's the focus that they wanted you to have. And I think it is a film that's transportive. And, there's a look in people's eyes when they have seen it, and I'm not sure why. I think it's the power of people knowing that they've been in the presence of something real, that it's not a fiction, that it's not some sort of Hollywood magic, that they've actually been somewhere and had a human connection with people that they wouldn't otherwise have met. And I think a film, when it's done right, can give you that experience. And I think Matt has achieved that.
It's an extraordinary film. Thank you so much for coming to talk to us about it. Stay with us. Just a quick mention there. Rosamund mentioned the Q&A that's taking place, the live Q&A, Monday, 4th of February. That's going to be broadcast live to cinemas via satellite with Rosamund, Jamie, Paul Conroy and director Matthew Heineman. And you can book that at aprivatewar.film. Other projects that you've got coming up, because some very interesting ones. Rosamund, I know that you're going to be playing Marie Curie in Radioactive.
Yes.
Another Marie?
Another Marie, another rebellious, spirited Marie. I was lucky to have these two women come into my life at the same time. They both, singular women who lived, a tremendously sort of passionate private life while living this very kind of fiercely committed public life. And I'm really excited to show people, because I think people have very little idea about what Marie Curie actually did.
Yeah, yes, exactly. So how would you...
she discovered, she's the only woman to have won 2 Nobel Prizes, first in physics and then in chemistry, because once she discovered the phenomenon of radioactivity, she actually needed to isolate the elements when she wasn't trained as a chemist. So she thought, well, I'll just train in chemistry then. And then she did, and won a Nobel Prize for it, it just shows a sort of mind that, never took no for an answer. I mean, she was one of, 27 women in the science department at the Sorbonne in the late 1890s, and 4,000 men. But she just lived equality. She didn't really fight for it.
And I wouldn't have guessed a passionate private life.
Well,
necessarily,
neither would I necessarily. But she had this amazing love affair with Pierre Curie, and he tragically died when they were still very young and had 2 small daughters. And I think she never really recovered. And she kept this journal after he died, which is one of the most movingly beautiful things I've ever encountered. It's just, you think, my God, that's how to love someone.
Fantastic. And when's that going to be out?
I think at the end of the year.
Okay.
I think in the autumn. But I have done something amusing as well. I'm not all sort of dressed in... God, I mean, it sounds like I'm sort of, the dreary junkie. Not that Marie Curie was dreary, but she was serious. But I've done this comedy with Chris O'Dowd, written by Nick Hornby, which is very short. It involves no commitment. 10-minute episodes.
And when's that going to be?
It's called State of the Union, and it's about a marriage in crisis, but, amusingly so.
It's hard to hang out with Chris O'Dowd without laughing.
It really is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
And was the 10-minute episodes? Where's that going to be?
We're not sure yet. It'll be found. You will find it. You will find it sort of from May onwards.
I'm going to seek it out.
You will
Don't
find
worry.
it.
Fantastic. And what about you, Jamie? I know you're going to be playing Will Scarlett, who I believe is being re-rendered quite substantially in the new Robin Hood film.
Yeah, that's already came out.
That's out already?
Yeah,
okay, I haven't seen that yet.
You should see it. It came out, oh God, I don't know. I'm terrible at this now. What year are we in?
2019.
Yeah, it came out just at the start of the year.
Okay, just missed that
one. No, it came
one.
out just the end of the year, last year. Jesus. Here we go. Anyway, so that happened.
Yeah. And what else have you got coming up?
I just did 2 movies back to back at the end of the year. Worked with a director called Drake Doremus, who did Like Crazy, and he did Breathe, and it's me and Shailene Woodley and Sebastian Stan, which is it's very sort of he makes very independent films in the truest sense, but very beautiful stories. So I did that in LA just before the end of the year, and then fitted in a sci-fi. It was my first ever sci-fi movie.
Oh, wow.
With Anthony Mackie called Synchronic. That I think both of those will come out later in the year. And then I'm about to become a father for the 3rd time, so I'm taking some very needed time off.
No wonder you don't know what year it is. It's all going on.
It's all a bit of a mess, yeah.
Listen, we are so glad to have you here. Thank you so much for coming to see us. A Private War out on the 15th of February, and it's just a fantastic movie. Thank you for talking to us about it. Rosamund Pike and Jamie Dornan. Cheers.
Thanks, Lauren. Thank you.